I was warned by everybody after I got elected about, hey, this one's pay for play, this, et cetera. I gave it the benefit of the doubt. I'm thinking, this is just haters are gonna hate type of mentality. And then, woe is me, naive, gullible, whatever you want to call it. It just turns out that it was exactly what was being described to me, and it's probably worse. Imagine this was only, what if I didn't catch it, right? What if I had not listened to the person that submitted some anonymous complaints to me about that trip, and if I hadn't decided to believe them, because it's always hard to gauge what's real and what's not, and who just hates someone or has a grudge and has an axe to grind, and in this situation, it turns out that maybe we struck some bribery gold.
Wow. That's scary to hear from a member of the public. But I think we all kind of had an indication there was some fuzzy stuff going on. Locally, federally, at every level, there's always someone on the take.
Something. They're getting, even if it's, I followed the letter of the law. Well, you had the grease skids, and that's it.
I think that's the best way to put it, where it's like, it doesn't matter whether it's illegal or not, right? Yeah. Is it morally correct to be in the position you're in, to take advantage of certain things? Like, I think that's wrong.
You didn't
even if it's completely legal.
You didn't read the article you said, but I wish that you had access to it, because you quoted me almost directly when his response was, well, I filed it on time and it was legal. And I said, to the reporter, I never accused anybody of doing anything illegal. I accused them being ethically and morally bankrupt. And I think it was maybe Thomas Jefferson that, when you become an elected official of the public, you become a property of the public. And, I'm uncomfortable with anybody even buying me lunch if they're not somebody I've had a long relationship with. So it's just a question of where's your moral compass? And it seems that minis are not true north.
Joshua, what's your last name?
Wostal.
Wostal.
Everyone butchers it.
Is that good enough?
It's perfect.
Well, you are on County Commission. We've been live. Is it okay if we keep that first part in? I think that was an important part. And before we went live, you were talking about who you represent, right? So what exactly does your seat on County Commission represent?
Sure. So I'm countywide District 7. I'm one of 3 countywide commissioners. You have 4 single members. As countywide commissioners, we represent more people than 11 governors of their entire states, which is why I'm an advocate under the county's 40-year-old charter that has never really been overhauled. The charter review board that's required is coming up in 25, that you truly go to single-member districts. You probably put like a population kicker on how many people one commissioner can govern over. And probably a cap, maybe 9 commissioners. You can debate that on what's the right number, but you also don't want too many chefs in the kitchen, too many mechanics under the hood type of mentality. But you definitely would get better, more local representation. You would get a more fair balance. I live in the unincorporated area. The unincorporated Hillsborough represents 70% of the population, the supermajority. But they get the least amount of representation. They only get 4 in their different areas. There's only one that consistently gets 6 of the 7 because of the way that the maps are drawn and because of the way that the county-wides affect the whole county, and that is the city of Tampa. The city of Tampa, that only represents about 22%. This is not a ding on the city. My business was in the city of Tampa for 5 years. The city only represents about 22% of the population, 23%. But they get 6 members actively almost living, if not living in the city, representing them as a whole. The other parts only get 4. And I think that there's a way that you could more fairly spread it out. Have more access to your commissioners. I live in the Northwest area in Odessa. My friend in Fort Lonesome Ranch, which you've probably never even heard of, still Hillsborough County. It's on the near the Mosaic Mines in the very southeast corner. If he and I want to hang out, that's a 4-hour rip back and forth, right, for us, with good traffic.
David, can you pull up Hillsborough County on Wikipedia? Because I want to see the population changes. Because one thing we were saying before the show is the amount of people that live in Hillsborough County now. It's almost, what is it, 1.6 million?
Almost 1.6 million.
And I wanted to see it in the 90s when I was born. I was born in 92. So I just wanted to see, like, just in my short lifetime, I'm only 32 years old, what the population difference is. Because maybe back then, right, if you have 300,000 people living in Tampa and 600,000 total in Hillsborough County, maybe to your point, it's not as much of an issue. Whereas now you've got over 1 million more people living outside of the city of Tampa than
no, you're absolutely right. The demographics have flipped. Before, it did make sense when the charter was written, which I believe was in like 1984, maybe a little earlier.
Wikipedia, because it'll show you decade by decade.
I think he had a graph up at the top, which was nice too. But I believe that the population then was only like 600,000 when the county charter was written, and it's never meaningfully been overhauled.
So 1980s, 650.
All right, see, I know my numbers.
That's an incredible amount of growth. And then look at the percent change, right? 50, 60%, 20, 30, 20. So it's consistently over solid 15. The average of that is probably in the 20s.
Yep.
So Hillsborough County for so many decades has had an incredible influx of people. Whereas the city, I think, relatively has stayed in the 300s for quite a while, even though it's grown quickly. It's just obviously there's more land to develop in Hillsborough County.
Yeah, and then they annexed New Tampa.
Exactly. But I do, being a city boy and a real cheerleader of Tampa, and, I appreciate so much our history and our culture, and Tampa makes our region, right? It's like the culture of Ybor and all these sort of stuff.
Sure.
I wouldn't want to lose representation as the population center of the region. It would suck to have all the other areas of the county and the other counties in general kind of dictating where we're going as a region, when I feel like Tampa is the reason for the region.
Yeah, I don't think that that's what you would get. I don't think that it would create that type of parochialism. The countywide commission seats, they have countywide and unincorporated funds. But when we're voting, the single member commissioners don't treat it as, well, that's the countywide general fund. So the countywide commissioners should largely decide where that's going. That doesn't happen. You wouldn't lose anything there. And there's no way that you would be able to draw maps and not have a lot of, I guess the point is that creating the more local access is the idea.
And I think that that's a beautiful point, and I totally agree, because people should feel like they are deeply connected to their local politicians. You mentioned you have like 2 staff members and you're dealing with 1.6 million people. You probably can't get to all your constituents and see what their grievances are. And that's obviously an issue. My specific point was relating to, as an example, maybe like a transportation initiative. I know All for Transportation passed and then failed. We can get into that later. But if the city of Tampa wants adequate transportation, like extending the streetcar, it's hard to get a guy that lives on a ranch in Hillsborough County to give a shit about that, right? If he's not going to use it. So there is that discrepancy where you have a big city, air quote, big city, but then in the same jurisdiction of government, you also have a guy living on 5 acres with some horses and cattle that doesn't care, and those people get to vote the same.
So let's jump on the transportation thing. I take a general approach to anything that I might know less than the person next to me. So the biggest problem with City of Tampa's transportation is the current HART charter. I think it needs to be upended, and I'll explain. Right now, you have a very reasonable fight between a bunch of people, 70% of the population, 77% of the population that doesn't live in the city, that never, ever uses HART and never will. And they are taxed for that service through a countywide property tax. Okay? That's what is funding that top ad valorem tax revenue line right there. That is the half millage rate that's taxing everyone, even the low-income people in Waimama, that I have begged for them to put a rotator of even just 12-seat vans from Waimama over to Ruskin area, to the hospitals, to the grocery stores, back and forth. No, we can't do it. We can't do it, Commissioner. That's the consistent response. Well, if you can't do that for Waimama, the lowest income area in the county that desperately needs public transportation, then we should probably consider not taxing them for the service anymore. So I believe it was in 2012, and I want to say this off the cuff. I'm a tax as minimally as possible type of libertarian-esque politician. I do believe in critical social safety nets for those of us that maybe were born in a way that they can't physically go to work like you and I can. I do believe in protecting those most exposed classes of people. And that's who generally rides HART now. And I want to protect them. Right now, what we're doing is not protecting them. We're jeopardizing their only form of not becoming more of a burden to society and less self-sustainable, because we're on a path to illegitimacy at HART. The ridership numbers, they said that they got them back up in a recent OPAGA study, performance study basically. They said that they got them back up to numbers, but I made the point, well, you got them back up to the numbers of pre-pandemic, but we're back up to those ridership numbers, but our population is significantly higher now. Did you consider that 15%, as you just saw over here? And they were like, well, no, Commissioner, you've made a great point. And I was like, okay, so then per capita ridership is down. And when you get those studies, that's a very important variable to consider. Public transportation ridership is not up. The ferry, going way down. I don't know if you can get those statistics. I have them on my other phone, unfortunately not here. Those ridership numbers are going like just plummeting. HMS just filed bankruptcy, the people that operate it. So now they're going to continue operating, it sounds like, under some other deal. But what I believe needs to be done is in 2012, I think it was, a unique tax that would have allowed the city of, I think it would have been St. Pete. It would have allowed the first municipality, which a constitutional change. You're preempted by state law. It's a statute change that cities can't tax themselves. A sales tax. Sales taxes are only countywide. I would like for the city of Tampa I would like for our delegation to pass the tax. It passed the state house and it passed the state's Senate. It got vetoed by Governor Rick Scott in 2012. A bill passed, a lot of people don't know about it, that would have allowed them to tax themselves and forfeit the property tax. They could have put in the city tax. They could have put in a sales tax, which is what? More subsidized by people that travel into an area. And it reduces the cost of homes because you've reduced property taxes. Even if it's a little bit, you're marginally reducing those barriers. It reduces the costs for all of the businesses because a lot of them own their commercial property and pay property taxes on it, right? So there's a lot of incentives to do it.
So just to pause right there and to
Sure.
break it down. So the idea would be reducing property taxes countywide and making up for it in a city tax.
Sales tax, which is paid partly by tourists, et cetera. And why I think that's important is right now, not to get too deep in the math, but a half-cent sales tax countywide in Hillsborough County is currently generating $200 million a year in revenue, a half-cent sales tax. The city, through their best efforts, even though it's difficult from the Department of Revenue's current structure, which they would have to do some work to make this happen because they don't allow cities to do it currently, is the best guesstimates are that the city, their allegations are that they produce 50% of that, the city of Tampa themselves, out of the whole county. Well, if that's true, we would do a couple of things. And this is a kind of a let's put our money where our mouth is type of situation. You can see right now that the transit system only is going to get $72 million a year of operating ad valorem tax revenue for this year. If that's true, that you generate 50% of a $200 million a year tax just in the city, that means the city would be able to generate $100 million a year for transportation. I just found you $30 million more dollars a year for your transportation. But here's the other big thing. I also removed all of the very reasonable complaints of 73% of the population that doesn't receive the benefit from it. So you're going to have less heartburn of the all for transportation types of things and the lawsuits. The downtown core can have more of a paved way to the type of transportation they want. The new FDOT mobility hub that's going in potentially where Charlie's Steakhouse is and the DoubleTree just got torn down, right? All of those things would have a lot less. I will fight against more countywide taxes for people that I know will never reap the benefits of those services. So that's my recommendation for increased funding, but also reduced barriers to entry of, hey, let's pave the way for some more robust transportation in the city of Tampa. Like 95% of the ridership comes from East Tampa anyways.
So right now, ad valorem tax revenue, this is countywide property tax. The revenue that is collected from that is $72,865,000. That's the fiscal year 2024 budget. So that is the money required to run. What is this here? This is HART, right? Or what is this?
This is HART.
So what you're saying is a half penny sales tax in the city of Tampa would more than pay for the entirety. According to these numbers right here, just at their face value.
Yep.
And you could do that by reducing countywide sales tax, including people that live in the city of Tampa's sales tax. Property tax.
Everybody. So what you're going to do is you're going to give them back $73 million of property taxes, which are unavoidable. And also that you pay for not only that, but you also pay for property taxes at the register of every business you go to. Never gets talked about, which is crazy to me. But on a triple net lease, in this very building, my friends at South Tampa Logistics, they used to be housed in here because I owned a UPS store, right? I sold it in February of this year. I built the one that's right next to the Raymond James football stadium. I sold it in February. So I charge you at my register because the landlord is passing through hit the property taxes on a triple net lease. So not only am I going to give you all of that 72 back, but you're also going to have unknown reduced impacts at the register potentially. And then you are going to do let's call it we'll just work with flat numbers, $100 million a year sales tax, which many argue, which I think is reasonable, 20% is subsidized by travelers. Okay. So
maybe more really, but
maybe more. So I've found you $100 million now. I've given you back 72, 20% is subsidized by out of the area. I'm not charging you. You're not paying much more than that's already there, except for that it's reduced off your property taxes. And the best thing about a sales tax is that you can choose to not go spend money. You can't choose to not pay your property tax.
Here's the question with that though. Who gets to dictate where that money is spent? Because I feel like if the city is being charged an extra 0.5%, the city's going to want to sit there and say, hey, we want to extend the streetcar. We want to do X, Y, Z.
So good question. So I already have our HART's legislative team and my colleagues on the HART board agreed with me, and we're going to Tallahassee this session. I want it to be, there used to be a Tampa transportation district type of deal. I like situations like the port. Here's my biggest thing is you got to get all of these politicians off of these boards. I am a MBA from UF who barely uses that MBA anymore. I ran a UPS store, and I went to war quite a bit. I'm not qualified. Just like everyone else. No disrespect, but the former board hired a CEO who turned out to paying $500,000 of your property taxes. The general fund is the only money she could have got to use that. So she spent $500,000 of your property taxes paying people hush money. 42 of 44 of the senior leadership ran off under her, and the state almost closed them down and put them into receivership because the board is just like, hey, this sounds nice.
Half politicians or all politicians, or how does it break down? Half. And the other half is experts in whatever field.
No. The other half is appointed from the people on the commission. The county commissioners, we've appointed civilians on there, and not one of them has transportation.
So what's the reason to have politicians on the board? Is it for public accountability?
Just so I like the model of the port. You have seasoned experts in the field. They likely have an interest to make sure that it runs right and runs well. And then you just have a politician on there to make sure, hey, this doesn't look right. Checks and balances type of deal.
Is that the state of Florida saying, hey, 6 have to be experts, 6 have to be politicians? Who dictates who goes on the board?
Our charter is our charter.
Hillsborough County.
That's just our charter. It's a charter that was passed in the county. And I think that we, as we get into talking about, do you want the streetcar? Why are the buses empty? I asked this.
But you going to Tallahassee, though, is to help get that charter changed to switch who can be on that board?
It's allow them to put forward a state law, because right now you cannot, a city cannot tax sales tax, right? The city has its property tax for, I think, what do you guys at 6.4 or something really high.
Like that.
But you don't have the ability to do a sales tax at the cash register. And I want everybody in the city to get the reduced property tax. Everybody in the county, all 1.6 million people and businesses get the reduced property taxes. And then the city, that's what the Tallahassee move is. If they allow it to happen, then it still would just be hey, would you guys like to do this? X and I don't want to instruct people, but I want to give them the option. I want to explain why I believe that my idea is better. Sales taxes are always more friendly to the low income and working class families.
So that all for transportation was the same tax, but what you're saying is strictly just the city limits. What all for transportation was a county-wide sales tax increase.
Yeah, and look, that tax, have you ever read the judgment on it?
It's semantics, right? Kinda. It's just how it was written. It was not appropriate in the eyes of the Supreme Court.
Nah, they were going to bucket the money. So basically, it's the same reason that my friend Karen sued the county as I was running, and she won right before I got elected. And they put the same tax back through the commission level in 2022, remember? And then the supervisor had to pink slip it and say, hey, if you vote for this tax, it's not going to be counted because Judge Moe ruled it illegal as well. So the reason is that she used a pizza party analogy. The judge did. It's hilarious. And it's basically if I invited you to a pizza party and then you were like, yeah, I'm going to go to the pizza party. But then when you showed up, I served you sardines. You'd be like, but hey, you got me here with pizza. And that's how they were going to try and bucket this money. It was, hey, we're going to fix the roads. And they said, we're going to fix the roads in Town and Country, Brandon, Fishhawk. Why did you do that? Oh, because you needed the Republicans in that area that desperately need roads to say yes on this tax. But then you don't really get the money and you can reapportion it and do 95% to $1.5 billion Brightline train, and we'll fill your pothole. You did get something. What's wrong? So
But
that's why.
it's such a massive tax effort, though. The fact that it passed in the county is just wild to me. I mean, how much money are we talking about? That offered, I mean, you just mentioned 100 million in the city limits for a half cent
So
or a half a percent
a
sales tax.
1 cent sales tax. Was all for transportation 1 cent?
Can you pull that up, David? I know you're busy right now, but
I-
we got some time. So all for transportation, I believe,
Was 1 cent.
or was it a half cent? We'll just pull it up and find out. But I think it took in like $500 million in a year and a half or something crazy.
Which, by the way, before December 31st, you need to file your receipts to get your money back. You know that right now. That's going on right now. Yeah,
See,
1%.
Now they have AI on Google, which is so cool.
So now, not then. So COVID shot up the sales taxes in Hillsborough County. Then, right now, a 1 cent sales tax is $400 million a year. Almost $400 million.
So much money that we could use for great things, but
Uh,
it almost sounds like when you pull up the HART budget,
yeah.
and it's 74 million a year, and then you look at the fact that we collected what does it say? $562 million. It's almost too much.
It's too much.
It's like it's crazy to say.
They
but,
will find a way to spend it.
Right. So your fear is the waste.
So we started talking about needs recently, and I asked our county administrator during a county commission meeting. She's a wonderful human being, and she's honest. I said, "Hey, if I found you $10 billion, could you find a way to spend it?"
Yeah, right.
And she quickly was like, "Yes."
But here's the thing. That is a lot of money, and when you compare it to the budget of HART of under 100 million, it's a crazy amount of money, right? This could fund HART for years and years and years. But here's the thing.
Way more than that.
If we want a regional light rail network, if we want to extend some sort of city modern streetcar that services multiple neighborhoods, wealthy neighborhoods if we want a real transportation plan, it's going to take hundreds of millions of dollars of local funds to get that done. Correct?
That's way less. And this is the only
way
reason.
less.
This is the only reason I know this. So recently in our TPO, Transportation Planning Organization meeting, it's a federally required board. Are you familiar with that board?
A little bit.
Okay.
There's a lot of shit to keep track of,
yeah.
to be honest.
Yeah, no, which is a problem, right?
Right.
We had an expert. He is currently a private consultant for one of the large amusement parks. I don't think it was Disney. I think it's for one of the other ones. But he used to be an executive at CSX. He used to be an executive at Brightline. Okay? So he knows the two most important things about a train, which is the train business and the railroad track business, which are two very different things. And CSX has a monopoly on those rail lines. And he broke down, I'll try and find you the link and text it to you after we're done sometime. He broke down that right now, all of those lines that are unused are all only set for commercial rail, which they don't even want to let us use anyways to get some of these semi-trucks off the port. We're hoping to get in there. I really hope CSX allows the port to start doing more commercial rail to get those trucks off the road. The amount of money and federal regulations to get those trains completely rebuilt for passenger rail, billions and billions of local
It's a different thing. I didn't know that. It's not the same rail.
Incomparable.
Huh.
So like when I heard him say that, I was like, okay, we've got to have an honest conversation at some point in society. The streetcar, we were talking about the history of the streetcar, I think would be now an appropriate time. So streetcar used to be steam, I think it was, and then electric. And what caused it to really stop being functional for society? And that was that following World War II, as it was largely replaced by automobiles and buses.
Yeah, we're on the streetcar website, and it talks about the history. So I'll just read that sentence. So reaching the peak of its popularity in the 1920s with almost 24 million passengers in 1926, which is a crazy number, Tampa's streetcar system rolled to a stop in 1946 following World War II, as it was largely replaced by automobiles and buses. So we're still there today.
So,
right, we still use automobiles and buses as our main form of transportation.
And I have some thoughts on that. You know, Americans are fiercely independent, and the goal was for them to get their own independent ridership and not be reliant on anyone. Two important things happened for me, and I'm not going to dog on them, but it was quoted in the Tampa Bay Times for both of them, and they both sat on HART board forever, and they were both interviewed. These HART board members are elected officials. They both live on HART bus lines, and Tampa Bay Times reporter asked them both, well, you live on the bus line. How often do you ride HART? And both of their responses were identical. Well, I would love to ride the bus, but my job is demanding and doesn't allow for it. We're not going to talk about how arrogant of a statement that is, but everybody else also needs to have the freedom in their mind of, well, hey, what if my wife gets sick? My kid's at school. I need to pick up and go. They all want that. Like, politicians aren't some unique butterfly where we only deserve to not ride the bus, but here's the bus for you. But that is largely, if you go and ask the people in HART, I've asked them that are in charge of going into the community and try and get interest. The sweet little old lady that's worked at HART forever. And I say, hey, why don't you tell me, why don't people, they don't want to ride the bus once they get away not to. That's their freedom. And so you can call this crazy, but at a different TPO meeting, the most recent one we just had, there's a guy named Greg Slater from THEA. Have you had him on?
He's been on, yeah.
He is a crucial resource to Hillsborough County and to Tampa. He's very smart. And he had it in his presentation. And I already knew a little bit about it, but I wanted him to expand on what was called. So what he's doing is they will implant nodes. We're going to get our tinfoil hat on here, but we got to start thinking, or we're going to try and force people back into a rail that got beat by the free industry and the free market in 1946, right? The free market decided and spoke loudly. And it was that people liked their independence of the automobiles and buses. We're going to try and force them backwards, or are we going to embrace future things on mass transit and moving bodies in traffic, right? People would not be so upset if the cars were still moving. Then they wouldn't care about growth, right? And they might not think, well, I need to go ride the streetcar because they know, hey, I can get somewhere reasonably and safely in my own car. And so I don't know how you do this in a city yet, but the innovations in what's called V2V, vehicle to vehicle communication, which has been around for a long time, but is now on a different scale. But also, and more importantly, what's called V2I, and he elaborates it in a much more articulate way than me, is vehicle to infrastructure, where it's signaling, hey, this is what's happening. Right. And when you start talking about, I mean, maybe these lanes that I've been trying to make sure, and FDOT's been good partners on and getting, where we get these dedicated bus lanes, over time, you might see those converted to that there is just autonomous vehicles that once you remove the element of the human element of driving, you're going to see way less congestion and accidents and fatalities.
Yeah, Greg Slater was talking about how we can use artificial intelligence for exiting and signals to plan, like in real time, like, hey, Taylor Swift just announced a concert. It's going to be here December 15th. Okay, we know that day people are going to be coming from XYZ regions. They're going to be getting off at this exit. Let's plan to have certain lights go red and green at different times to accommodate, right? It's like the fact that that's not already implemented is pretty crazy. That sounds like something we should jump on. And I think that's being worked on. That's what Greg said. They're looking at that closely. I think even Jane Castor was on the show. We talked a little bit about that too. Autonomous travel, if done the right way, is one of the strongest solutions to transit. But back to the streetcar real quick. There's a lot of conspiracies that happen, just as they do today. All the bullshit, right? All the bullshit we've talked about.
I love conspiracies.
But here's the thing. Everything we've talked about regarding different politicians meeting with lobbyists and being on the take and right, the same thing happened in the 1920s with the streetcar, where the automobile industry, the rubber industry, right?
Okay.
The contractors for all the highways got together and they actually started to purchase streetcar lines, reduce their service, made them inadequate. And then people said, hey, here, buy a car, financing, it's easy to use, park it in your driveway, right? So yes, on one hand, the free market won, okay, and the cars and the buses won, and they've won for 100 years. But there was a little fuckery going on with that.
Okay, but there always is going to be some of that. Yeah.
Correct. But I also believe that the streetcar, maybe it wouldn't go to Waimama, okay? But I do believe that within the urban core, when you have a dense city, and this rendering right here has all the new development. We've posted it before by Studio HB. I believe it really is a viable solution. When you talk about downtown, Ybor City, Tampa Heights, that loop could have a streetcar. Doesn't need to be a rickety old streetcar like we have now. Could be a more modern version.
Sure. That's
quicker, more frequent, more comfortable. It could absolutely be an adequate solution in our urban core. How it translates to Waimama, other people in Hillsborough County, and other people in the region, I don't know. You got to get to the streetcar stop, number one.
Well, that is the whole benefit of my proposed state law change, is that you guys can have that conversation yourselves, and we'll figure out what we need to figure out with Waimama.
Right.
And then it stops all of the infighting that has led to gridlock.
Correct. The stagnation of it is the problem, because if we could have solved this 2 decades ago, we would be talking about more forward-thinking conversations instead of putting on a Band-Aid and ripping it off and putting it back on.
Yep.
And nothing has changed, and money is being spent, and it feels like it's all wasted. And that's where we are now.
Waste studies for days.
Study after study after study.
And I think that, I have a deep sense of belief that, like, most people that get involved in this stuff are just normal, good people, and they want it to be fixed.
Mm-hmm.
But then you get in here and you get all of the different interests and, well, maybe not this, maybe some more of that. And who gets punished are you and me. I drive in from Odessa. You don't have local transportation. And I think that, and this might be me being gullible again, like I was about that particular politician was not pay for play. I was proved wrong. I believe that if we gave the power to a district, much like the port, you're going to have appointees from the governor's board on there. You're going to have a local CEO that's not picked by local establishment types, right? And I think that you could get real progress and less bullshit.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
And I think that the most democratic American individual representation you could have is one like we're describing, where the city has a tax, the city dictates what it needs, the people of the city are telling the politicians, and the will of the public is being moved forward. And at the same time, the underprivileged family in Waimama can get what they want too.
Yep.
And how about the person that lives in Riverview and commutes to St. Petersburg? They're never going to be on a rail system. If they're on a rail system, we're probably talking about decades and decades in the future.
Oh.
We are so far away from a regional rail system like a lot of people want. We're so far away from that because we can't even figure out how to extend a streetcar 15 blocks. And we can't even get a bus line in Waimama to pick up some people that can't afford to get to their goods and services otherwise.
We're going through a regional talk right now on the TPO. We're trying to do a regional TPO with Pasco and Pinellas. And when you talk about pettiness that leads to poverty. That's what I like to call some of these things. It turns out that because the federal government is so involved in these TPOs, but they're the conduit for a lot of this federal money, FDOT wants to have some reasonable regional conversations. West Shore would have been done a decade ago, but the city of Tampa didn't get something that they wanted on the Ashley exit, so they torpedoed it. And then everybody suffered. And now we're still 8 years out. We could have had the West Shore interchange done by now. We got a Tampa City councilman whom I think is a good person, but they get like this, well, I want to be right and I want the power. And it turns out that under federal law and the TPOs, the largest city, when you're talking about these mergers or changing the TPO charters, whatever it is, has veto power. So every time we talk it up and we're talking about trying to move the area forward, he's like, well, don't forget, I have veto power. The city has veto power. And it's like, that's not productive, man. Like, we're trying to think regionally and locally at the same time. You brought up the AI of the stoplights. And you asked me, a good question, maybe before we started. I think you said about some of the things that as I've gotten into it, that I've unwound in my head.
Right.
And there are something called AICPs, and FAICPs. These are like credentialed planners. They're urban planners. And a lot of the stuff that they do doesn't make sense to me. And then on the Planning Commission, we have a guy who's the chair right now. His name's Nigel Joseph. And he's talking to me. I'm like, man, all your guy did sound great. Like, he's appointed by us and he's the chair. And I'm like, what's your background? Well, I'm an architect. And okay. And he gives me more and more ideas. I'm like, well, what are these planners? And I look up where planners came from. Planners were created by an architect a long time ago. And he created these certified planning industries. Well, now all of these planners are not architects. And it occurred to me that the reason that the non-AICP architects' ideas seem to make sense to me is because those are the core values of being a planner, and they seem to not be in that field. We almost didn't hire the new executive director of the TPO. He almost didn't get hired just because he didn't have those 4 letters beside his name. Fortunately, we overcame that, and he's an architect, and he's doing a great job. And what you said that you thought we should be doing, his first big change that he already put through, shout out to Johnny Wong if he watches this, Director Wong, is he reorganized what our first priorities were, and he cleared up the confusion about what smart cities are, and that is about prioritizing the timing of the stoplights, predictive traffic models, all of the data that's out there. The same reason that they want our phones, they give you the phone for free because your data is more important. Same thing with traffic.
Well, it's also like, dude,
he reshuffled that.
Well, yeah. I think that's super appropriate.
Yeah.
You know, when you talk about extending a streetcar or adding another bus line, whatever that transportation plan may be, you're talking about years and years and years and a lot of money.
Yeah.
When you talk about switching a couple traffic lights over, I'm not saying it's an easy task because there's a lot of studying and a lot of planning and all that. It's certainly easier to do that. It's certainly easier to integrate technology and work at a much more quick pace. I feel like there's a laundry list of things we could do tomorrow like that. Simple stuff. Switching around certain stop signs, adding stop signs to areas, speed bumps in certain neighborhoods, but maybe make speed limits higher on other roads where it's appropriate. I don't know, right? But there's little things you could do that could have a 10, 15, 20% difference, maybe less. But if you're talking about an area, how many people live in Tampa Bay? 4 million now, I think is the number. And right, in all these counties around Tampa Bay.
I think that's right.
4 million people, 1.5 million, 1.6 million in Hillsborough. It's a lot of people to move. So when you talk about 5% difference, 5% improvement, it's
huge.
Freaking awesome. And then to prey on a larger solution, look, we know that's going to take a long, long time. So it sounds like the new director is almost focused on those quick, more dynamic solutions. But I also think it's so important to have a plan. aren't planners important? Don't we need to know where we're going? Don't we need to know what to look out for?
I have feelings about planning, especially because, well, there's two different sides of planning and planners. Planning people's property,
Yeah.
which is a huge question mark that will never be resolved in my head. Because, there was this small thing that was started over other people thinking they had the right to plan your property for you. And that was the Revolutionary War that founded the United States of America, right? So I'm not very comfortable with, well, I'm planning that, you can't have commercial on this segment of your property. And it's like,
yeah,
how long have you been paying the property taxes to maintain this land? But
but like you said, it's even deeper than that too. It's a foundational American doctrine of property rights that initially made America the country it is today. Property rights were the real difference.
Yeah.
The fact that I can put up a fence and do what I want was so different at the time from other countries. It really was our foundation.
Yeah.
And in a lot of ways, unfortunately, we've gotten so far away from that. And in the city of Tampa, that process has been piecemealed over decades. And so now it's muddy and confusing, and the developers have to pay a lot of money for attorneys to figure it out, or they have to have a ton of experience. So some of the new blood, the new developers, like a young guy like myself trying to make a couple things happen, it's confusing. It's hard to get through.
Oh, there's tons of gates.
Really even worse is the neighbors. Just the residents of the city. You don't know what can be built next to your house. That's a problem. So the good news is Tampa's reworking that whole thing right now and doing a comprehensive code update and changing some things. That's good news. But yeah, to your point, like, I think property rights should always be at the strongest position possible for the property owner. But of course, that's not to say I should be able to build a glue factory right here in this neighborhood, right? There's certainly a line.
So there was an area that right when I was getting elected, people fought against somebody that wanted to build some homes, I think. Well, that person went and found out something else they could do that they didn't need commissioner's approval on, which was these state licensed burn pits. And then everyone was like, well, you don't want a burn pit.
Right.
What about the elementary school? And the person was like, well, fine. Then, like, can I build on my land then?
Right.
And that's who am I to dictate to you outside of what we just talked about, reasonable limits, land that you've been, like farmers. Hey, you complain about their dust. We're expanding the urban service area right now. Do you know what that made up line is?
Mm-mm.
Okay. In the Hillsborough County, we have this made up line called the urban service area. Got put in the early 90s, and it was supposed to be a growth management tool for planning, right? So we just said a plan is a good thing. I agree. However, if you create a tool for a politician or the bureaucrats, they're going to use that maximally.
For sure.
And not just them, but also activists. And they saw that as like, okay, well, cool. This was just supposed to be a tool to promote 80% of growth inside this line. Promote, not dictate. It says that in our comprehensive plan. That's a state-required tool. Well, over the past several decades, it's been just used as a hard and fast Great Wall of China. You won't build anything outside of it. And the farmers are like, wait a minute. If you're telling us that we have no development rights, that's how a farmer goes to a bank and says, hey, I believe I have this. This is the appraised value of it because of that.
Right, yeah.
And I need $30,000 a square acre to feed or seed to farm my land. If we start telling them, oh no, sorry, you're only permanent agriculture, one home per 5 acres. You can't do anything. And we have things like that right now in Hillsborough County. If we start telling them that, they're going to be like, well, I'm selling my land because everyone's complaining. And they're going to come in for development. So it's one of those, you got to promote them to be here, but you can't dictate that they stay. And that's the line that seems to be lost on property rights as we grow outside of the city. I know you're more focused on city conversation right now, but yeah.
Well, I think I'm just focused on having a balance. Why can't we all coexist? My heart does break. I kind of grew up driving from Tampa to Sarasota basically my entire life. My mom's family's from down there, my dad's family's from Tampa. And so I've seen the growth over the last few decades. And it does kind of suck as a native Floridian to see these pasture lands turn into these neighborhoods. Those neighborhoods are good from a perspective of a couple things. One of them is people have a place to go. There's a lot of people moving to Florida, a lot of people moving to Tampa Bay, Tampa, Hillsborough County, and they need a place to go. And if they don't have a place to go, it'll increase costs for everyone else. Like when my family's looking for a home, if we don't build other homes, now they're my competition to buy a home, right?
Yep.
And I've experienced that firsthand. So it's good to have supply. It's also good to have more of a tax base, right? It's good for the county to have more money coming in.
To an extent, I'll agree with that. Yeah.
As a general statement, right?
Yeah.
As a general statement. I think it's bad though for a big reason. And the big reason is when all of those people want to go to the beach, when all those people want to go to a Bucks game, a Lightning game, or a nice restaurant, or come to the city, and this goes back to that transportation conversation, they're all on the roads. There's no other viable option.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a problem. So it's not that I'm so focused on the city. It's that how do you get people in and out of a city, a real city, which Tampa's becoming very dense, very,
Sure.
You look at the skyline of Tampa, it's doubled in the past few years, and it's only going to continue. The ownership of real estate, the capital, everything is aligning to where we're going to have massive growth in this city. We got to have a way to move people and goods and services around without relying on these road networks. They just keep building these roads. It's not going to solve the issue. So I think we do need regional rail. I think we do need to expand the streetcar. I think we do need to invest in autonomous travel. I think bus lanes are good because what do you do if the bus doesn't work down the road? Or what do you do if the free market enables a scenario where autonomous travel is much more efficient than buses in the future? You've got a bus lane. You've got the right of way. Maybe you rip out the bus lane, you put in rail one day. Who knows? Maybe a gondola. Who knows what transportation is
Big
in
dollar
the future?
signs.
Right, big dollar signs, but that bus lane is infrastructure so much more than it is an actual bus route in my head. And I think you kind of mentioned that you look at it in the same way. And I know a lot of other people do. But my whole point is I do think planning in regards to some of those pasture lands and saying, hey, maybe we don't want to promote more dense development out in a county. Maybe we don't want to put 5,000 homes on this particular piece of land with no plan to get all those cars in and out of that area. You go to, where is there more traffic? Downtown Tampa or Wesley Chapel? Well, it depends on the time of day. It depends on what's going on. But when you see I think the trolley had, what was the annual, can you type in annual ridership, Tampa streetcar? I want to say it's over 1 million people. That's 1 million people off the roads. That's a significant number.
I don't think it's not a million.
You go to Wesley Chapel, right? You go to Wesley Chapel around a mall and you're sitting in freaking traffic. There's no high rises around you. I don't know that the city is the cause of the traffic. My belief is that suburban development causes way more traffic per capita than a city could ever do, especially when you consider economic output.
I don't know how true that is because what we talked about West Chase.
Right.
Most of us, we have our Publix, we have our restaurants, we have our World of Beer, we have whatever we need right there. Most of our traffic is in that nucleus, in that bubble. And development way out in those external areas should be done. And most developers have gravitated towards that to avoid the nightmares that's happened in like Apollo Beach.
Right.
To where they're like, hey, let's give them 90% of what they need is going to be right here. And that reduces a lot of the congestion of off hours, normal hours, evening hours. Moms are going to the grocery store locally. Dad's going to the grocery store locally. The Tico streetcar, I'm not against. I'm just saying that The train was great 100 years ago. Why doesn't the Amtrak have tons of ridership? You know, we have an Amtrak route, right? It has abysmal ridership.
Well, and even Brightline's had problems, right? Brightline's costs
9-figure losses in Q1 of this year, right?
Well, I don't know the details. I'm sure that's true.
Yeah.
But even when you look at the cost of those tickets, I think it's more than people anticipated. When you look at the time it takes you to get from here to Miami, it's a little bit more than people thought initially,
Absolutely.
right? So
I'm not against them.
No, and neither am I. But
Yeah.
I guess my point is, I don't know that it's the golden ticket we all thought it would be. But also, to your point of suburban development, let's recognize it's two different lifestyles.
That's right.
If you're a family living in the suburbs and you go to your Wildebeer and your Publix, fantastic.
Yep.
But don't come into Tampa and expect there to be free parking in an open space the second you get here.
Oh, do people complain about the paid parking?
Well, traffic and parking and vehicular operations in general, for someone that lives out in a gated community that enjoys their Wildebeer and Publix, I don't think they should have that same expectation when they come into the city.
I'm paying $6.50 to park mobile right now.
Yeah,
right up there.
$6.50, right? But I would also argue, you live in Westchase and you're coming down to the city. Maybe that should be expected. And I think a lot of people in Hillsborough County want to come enjoy the city in the same manner they do the world of beer.
Maybe. I just if you built a train up to Westchase, I'll never ride it.
Right.
I'll never be comfortable with my wife riding it for safety reasons. I'm not going to do it. And there's a lot of people like that. A lot of people like that.
I think you're right. Yep.
And it's just a stigma that you can't force. It's kind of like if you force the free market, you're going to get an outcome like moratoriums on building, which they did for several years. They completely choked out the supply chain, and now homes are completely unaffordable in Hillsborough County. And that's a supply and demand issue. And you can't do that. But what did happen, and we talked about this before we started, is that most of the traffic for me on my way to see you, even at 10 a.m., where you would think, hey, that's out of normal hours.
Right.
Most of the traffic, I was backed up all the way to Hillsborough to the 275 interchange, which is normal. Sometimes it backs up all the way to exit 7 past Linebaugh.
Yeah.
All of that mostly, it has nothing to do with our homes in Carrollwood or Town and Country or Westchase. That's because they told the development community and farmers who have secession plans, my good friends that are huge strawberry farmers, super sad story, but we do have lots of illegals, and they have been arrested here in Waimama area. That's where they're farmers. They arrested 2 illegals from Waimama and 1 legal from Riverview not too long ago. Ashley Moody, Grady Judd, and Sheriff Chronister, who trafficked in fentanyl from Mexico to California, back over to here, to Polk County. They lived here. It was enough fentanyl to kill the population of Hillsborough 3 times. It was enough fentanyl to kill 5 million people. Very sadly, their only secession plan, their 19-year-old grandson, that there was like a kid to them, amazing kid, and he, for a 19th birthday party, decided to experiment one time, and it was laced with fentanyl and put him in a cardiac arrest. Well, guess what? They have no secession plan. What, are you saying that they're required to donate their land to the government? Because their farming's done. If they can't find a farmer to buy the land, what are you saying to them? And they've been farming it for a century, some of them.
And so giving them the option to sell it to a developer, right?
Yeah.
Having that land use on the table for future generations, right? I live on
a citrus field, or maybe a cattle field. The big community, we recently expanded, Aston Farms, big strawberry farm. They expanded out a little bit into their property. That's right on that line where all the public utilities are. And all of the brand new community that was built out in 2016, well, they're up in arms. No, you can't build there.
Right.
Well, you were a pickle farm, next to that strawberry farm who's been there for 107 years, and now you're complaining about their dust. You hijacked a critical exit between your neighborhood that was supposed to be for his commercial pack plant that's right behind you that's been there forever. You didn't want him there.
Mm-hmm.
Now he's not going to be there. And that's a conversation that I think that is uncomfortable, but you got to be reasonable with yourselves about what you're saying somebody else can do with their property.
I think so. And I think in general, it's a strong position for Americans to have good property rights. And I think that extends in the city, what you can and can't build. But I think I agree with you. It does extend to farmers. But it also doesn't mean unmitigated growth. It also doesn't mean tear down every forest. It also doesn't mean build over all the wetlands. I mean,
that's right.
And we'll dig. I do want to talk to you about the wetland issues that we had in the county and areas that have flooded in the county that we should figure out a way to mitigate in the future. But really, really quickly back to, and then we can get off the transportation thing. Cause I know you're probably busy. We can't be here all day.
No, it's okay.
Even though this is great. I'm really enjoying this conversation.
Me too. Thank you.
And so you mentioned that you would never ride that train.
Yeah.
And I think you're totally correct. There's a stigma attached to public transportation in this country.
Yep.
It's not just a Tampa issue. It's a national thing. People don't want to ride the bus. I don't want to ride the bus. I want to be in my own car. I want to listen to my music.
And I support you being in your own car.
Right.
By the way, I want to cover terminology that keeps getting used by some of your guests called induced demand that I completely disagree with. So I want to cover that.
Save it. Induced demand. Because I've seen that explanation and it makes sense to me, but I'm excited to hear what you have to say. So I do think that there are a handful of people. I don't know how many. We've never done it before, but there are people that would probably ride transportation from areas outside of the city of Tampa to Tampa. I don't know if that number would be a high number, but you could certainly say it's more than one person. So now there's a cost benefit analysis involved. I don't think it's would they ride or would they not? It's like how many people would, and then if we're building all that infrastructure, is it worth it because there's X number of people riding it? So maybe it wouldn't be 70, 80, 90% of people that live in that area that would otherwise drive a car, now they're going to hop on a train. But even if it was like 20, 30% and you could somehow make the numbers work, aren't you getting a lot of cars off the road? Wouldn't that be a good thing to reduce that traffic count by 20%? I mean, your highway lobby's not going to like that, right? FDOT might not like that. I don't know what their positions are on this whole deal, but.
Well, I think that everyone understands and agrees that we can't pave our way out of the nightmare between Tampa and Orlando.
Right.
I'm never going to ride their train ever. And for reasons you said, it's unaffordable. I've got a family. I'm working on another one. I know. And my friends are the founders of No Tax for Tracks. And I'm pretty sure that one of them agrees to an extent. Like, she's not saying it's a railroad track, but another lane, it's just introducing more human elements in all those lanes if people can't handle it. So I don't know what that solution is. But, the corridor is still being preserved, even though Brightline got vetoed. The corridor is being preserved just in a different way, and they're not getting the money. 20 to 30%, that's a big hypothetical number that just doesn't seem to be proven by the amount of the million people that you're saying.
That's an ambitious number you're saying.
Balloon to 100 million and 8 riders. That's not people, though, and they have no way of distinguishing to me how many unique riders get on these things.
That's a good question. What do they mean by ridership?
They can't tell me.
Is that really?
At HART.
So when you say, hey guys, because let's just break it down. So they have 1.31 million riders. Well, they don't even say riders, right? They say ridership is 1.31 million in 2023. That's not 1.31 million people?
It could maybe be, here's a stop. There's 5 stops in between. That's 5 riders. How many unique riders did you get off the road?
You have asked this question.
Oh, I've asked it during HART. They don't track it.
Now, what do they say? They don't track it.
They don't track it.
So they don't track how many people get on the trolley. They track essentially number of
and
riders.
Same for bus. Because I wanted the numbers for buses. because I believe the amount of unique riders, and you might fall out of your chair and not believe me on this one, but I believe the amount of unique riders on HART is no more than 6,000 people.
Whoa.
And I believe that that's factual, that can be proven. And I've asked for it to be earlier this year.
So if what you're saying is true, that would be a shocking fact when you talk about 6,000 people for $70-something million.
For $108 million, because the federal and state matches are also their taxes. Mostly federal. They barely get any state match, right?
Now,
but all those federal matches.
Where are you coming up with that number?
There is a gentleman who is an expert in transportation. He actually used to be on the HART board. He used to work for directly for President Trump in 2016's U.S. Department of Transportation. He is a genius in the field of transportation. And he's
super qualified.
Broke me down and he loves public transportation. He wants it to work. He's not attacking it. He's wanting to give reasonable information, and he walked me through some numbers. I went and bounced it during some HART board meetings and asked the person that's in charge of collecting data. And they're just, when they start, when someone starts feigning to me, I'm like, okay, I'm going to need a way for either the Pink Flamingo app where we charge people, remove the cash pay, unique IDs. I want to know how many unique IDs tapped to pay for a ride month by month. Because if that's truly only 6,000 to 8,000 people for $108 million a year, I would rather just start saying, hey, who's got a driver's license? Because it'd be cheaper for us to just buy you a vehicle.
Well, I mean, to that point, what if it was 10, 15? What if it's 20,000 people? Isn't that still not enough to justify over $100 million?
And I'm going to blow your mind even more. The new CEO of HART, extremely qualified, is his second best characteristic. His first best characteristic is that he's just this hardline Boston Transportation Union guy who lays it out plainly and is just, here's the facts. So I'm no longer wading through, my first 8 months on HART were firing the corrupt CEO that half of the board was refusing to get rid of, even though we had evidence provided that she was doing these things. So that's another reason transportation doesn't work, right? But he said that even if I doubled his operating revenue right now with their current model, because we're having a lot of bus routes that are being 60 to 30 minutes, not 15. 30 to 60 minutes is your pickup times and wait times at these different stops. Even if I doubled it, he would not be able to expand service at all, his revenue. He would only be able to improve the pickup times of our current routes.
And this is from the mouth of the chair of the board of HART, or who?
Of the CEO of HART, the one that's actually qualified.
So this is from the CEO.
That's right. No disrespect to our chair. He's an amazing guy. It's just that we're not transportation. He's a brilliant attorney.
But the CEO is the guy with the qualifications. He runs HART.
He said it 3 times in public hearings.
How do you figure that out? How do you, as a county commissioner, right? You have members of the public that you represent. When you hear something like that, sounds like we need to go back to the drawing board.
And those are the ideas that I'm proposing.
Right.
Is let's give you something fresh and new, and remove. And so when they were gonna put HART into receivership, the state was, because they have the authority to. I kept telling the consultants the biggest problem is that you're a bunch of bureaucrats and politicians, unqualified, running this. You got to get us off of there. You got to get us off. Port, same thing. You get one person from the city. I think you get the mayor, and you get one county commissioner. The rest of them, it's the industry. And I think that that's what you got to move to. You've got to remove, I know this sounds bad since it's a government-funded organization, but you got to remove the politics from these businesses. HART is a business. You run a business. I run a business. We understand bottom lines. We sign the back of the paycheck. Politicians, most of the time, I think I'm the only commissioner, no, I might have one more now, that has in their lives experienced signing both sides of the paycheck, which is very important in understanding, hey, how am I spending money, right? Signing both sides of someone's paycheck, and the front, not just the back. And I think that that's a crucial skill set that a politician should have in making their decisions on these organizations, and they don't have it.
Mm-hmm.
Let's get us off of there. We don't need political grandstanding. HART right now, to me, is the lifeline for our most vulnerable class of citizens. So my mission is to protect it at all costs, because I don't like to see, I am fine with subsidizing for the low-income communities to an extent to make sure that they don't need more government subsidies. And if they lose their only form of transportation to work and to the doctor and to their whatever else they need, to the grocery store, some of them, grocery shop on the bus, then they become agents of the state. And I'm going to work to protect HART for that reason alone. All these other, hey, fancy ideas, the streetcar, whatever, I'm apathetic to them. I'm not going to be the one running rails across it to torpedo it. I'm just going to give you a different plan that I think will give you all access to what you want. The downtown core business people can stop fighting with the people in Plant City, Fishhawk, Riverview, Brandon, Waimama, Ruskin, South Shore, Apollo Beach that don't want to pay for your stuff.
Exactly.
I just want to remove the unnecessary fighting, man. Like the whole, can't we all just get along thing? Mm-hmm. That's what I think this transportation initiative. But on the other end of it, I said during the HART board meeting to our lobbying group, the governor has every reason to veto this, because you've got the mayor during COVID threatening to sue him with people's property taxes. Like, he's fully incentivized. So I'm sending feelers up to people. I have good connections up there, and just saying, if the state and House, please do it. Please just ask him to not veto this and have a conversation about why it could be good. It could be good for the hospital systems too, right? Removing more cars off the road. And it could be good for the airport, which is a major regional hub. But the whole getting the trolley around, man, you've got to watch that PR guy about the lift. CSX isn't even talking to us yet. Because they are a monopoly. So they don't talk to anybody because they don't need to. We can't even make that happen, much less find $10 billion to redesign just those railroads. And that might be an underestimate, according to him.
What if they don't want to sell those railroads? What if they say, well, we want to keep these for, logistical purposes?
They won't sell them. So you're not only going to pay to overhaul them, you're probably going to pay a user fee too, ongoing, which will be another added cost, which will need to be subsidized. And right of way, if you wanted to try and get away from them, yeah.
Oh, right. No, right. Good luck. I feel like we're past that point.
Walt Disney tried to bring in the monorail in the 60s or so, and it got laughed out. And it's probably really what should have been done, and you could have had the access and a light kind of monorail.
Yeah.
Sounds silly, but it's low maintenance, low cost if the infrastructure is already there, and that's just not going to happen.
Well, would have been a lot cheaper to do it back then. You would have had the infrastructure today. Toronto actually it was one of the only, I think it's the only regional trolley network in North America that stuck around from that time period we discussed earlier.
Yes.
And it's, I think, the most popular trolley network in North America. So I believe that had we not ripped up those tracks in the 1940s in Tampa, we would have had something more to work with.
You would have had a chance.
You would have had a chance.
Yeah.
You would have had a chance. Yeah, I think at the core of it, is the discrepancy between the way people live, the way most people live in Hillsborough County is in their communities and neighborhoods and driving to Publix. That's the way most people live.
Yeah.
There is representation in Tampa that I don't feel like is being adequately spoken for when it comes to extending this trolley network. Just in the same way, there's not representation for those people in Waimama.
Yeah.
It's the same issue for different groups of people. And the problem and the reason nothing is getting done is because the cooks in the kitchen want different things. And because they want different things, then nothing gets done.
That's right.
Right. So I hope you're successful in your efforts. And it all comes down to, it sounds like, the governor making a decision to either veto this or not.
The House and the Senate would have to pass it too. I mean, but it passed in 2012.
Okay.
So it had a chance. Still has to be discussed.
Is this popular locally? Are you getting support locally for this?
I mean, it's surprised a lot of people. Look, I ran on a platform that I will never, ever support increasing your taxes. Sorry, you've got tons of money. We've got to figure something out. And you've got to start proving that you can spend the money wisely. That's got to happen before any other conversations.
Yeah.
We're no one's proving that we're spending the money wisely, period. Not the cities, not the county, and not HART. HART's doing a much better job now under CEO Drainsville. But this is reducing a regressive property tax that is subsidized by a lot of working class and low income families, and replacing it with a sales tax, which is subsidized by people from out of the area and higher end spenders, which are the higher income households. So it's much less of a burden for the middle income and lower class individuals. So that's why I'm advocating for a half-cent. City can do up to a half-cent sales tax for their own transportation. Let's say if they have a population of over 300,000, that's a requirement, right? And you put it in place, and then if you want to put the trolley up to New Tampa because you think that you'll be able to get people off the road, then you're not going to have you're not going to have 1.2 million people coming down on you because they don't want to pay for it. Does that make sense?
It makes complete sense. And it also would eliminate the issue we have currently with the streetcar, right? So HART wants the city to make up for essentially the grant money running out.
That's right.
Right. So I think it's like $1.3 million discrepancy. And HART has been basically taking, they've done all the administration and the oversight, and it's, HART spending a good amount of money on that. And they want the city to foot the bill, right? Is that where we're at?
Forever we were told that HART was, by the former CEO, that HART was not paying anything, that FDOT's grant was covering it. Well, the new CEO came in, he was like, Commissioner, that's not true.
Yeah.
And you're like, sticker shock that they just weren't analyzing the costs properly, the former CEO and her team. And so they were told, the mayor was told in April that was going out by FDOT. They didn't surprise anybody. And then FDOT was such a great community partner that the district secretary was like, we're going to help you though until the end of the year, even though they knew way ahead of time it was ending in April. And he came and was a huge community partner. So you were talking about, well, we don't know how the road lobby in FDOT's going to fill. Actually, they've been huge partners in the success of that train. Actually, they should probably be thanked for being the only reason that it is where it is.
Yeah.
And they deserve that credit. And then he came up above and beyond to make sure that it kept going. But then everyone just kind of was like not taking it serious. And then they were like, well, we've told you a million times it's done. So here you are.
And here we are, 60 days away or less than that money running out?
That's right.
And so what happens if the money runs out and the city says, we can't
HART didn't have the money. We barely got into the black.
Is that the end of the streetcar? Could be.
Unless the private sector, whom reaps a lot of the benefit from it, steps in. Public-private partnership. People do it all the time.
It's so discouraging.
Or fares. Which is what...
Can fares cover it, though, realistically? Because wouldn't you have a ridership decrease? Has that been studied?
That's,
I mean, if it's free and you have a given number of people, you'd have to imagine increasing the cost would decrease the ridership.
I mean, when certain people say free, I say subsidized by taxpayers.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the word free in government is very dangerous. I just say, well, which low income family that's struggling to get by is helping subsidize this right now? And are they benefiting from it? No. Okay, let's have a fair. And so, the economics of it are the economics of it. And trying to control it, I think, is foolish. It's going to be what it's going to be. And either the public supports it or it dies.
Wow. Well, it started out as completely private, no? Didn't it start out as a Tampa Electric company? Go back
Absolutely.
to that, right? That was the Tampa Electric company who created the trolley line.
I think
completely private. I don't know if the city took it over at some point. So if we go to history, where does it say in the beginning here? Tampa's first electric streetcar lines, built in 1892, quickly became an essential part of everyday life. But it doesn't say who owned it. I want to say, beginning in 1984, the Tampa and Ybor City Street Railway Society acted as a catalyst. That was the beginning of the modern streetcar, which opened in 2002.
That's right.
But the origin, maybe that would be a Google. But I believe, the point is, I believe it was private.
I think so too.
And I think there's a lot to say about the transportation ecosystem here regionally going private. We haven't really touched on the ferry, and I know you said the ridership is down on the ferry, but I would imagine that's another solution too. Maybe more of a novelty. I think we're probably years away from a real ferry, a real transit ferry that could even have cars on it and stuff like you'd see.
New Orleans?
Yeah, New Orleans or in the Northeast, And I know there was efforts to do some sort of a ferry from South Tampa near the MacDill Air Force Base area into Apollo Beach.
That was a financial disaster. That's dead.
That's dead. But can we quickly talk about why that is?
None of the they started out, it'll cost 15 million, 20, 40.
So just this snowball of money going out the window. But can we start with the question of, do you believe that idea makes sense on its face? I mean, you have a lot of people that work at MacDill. You probably knew people that live in Riverview, Brandon, that might hop on a ferry, you go to the base, come back.
Yeah, I because of that downtown South Shore ferry situation, every single turn was a turn of dishonesty from the people proposing it. And then it turned into, we're going to need the county to own all of the assets as well and maintain them and the dock, even though Mosaic was trying to be a huge community partner and donate the land. And it was like, okay, so you want a sole source, guaranteed no bid contract to you. You want no risk. You want us to hold all of the risk. You want no initial investment, and you want all of the benefits. And then if it doesn't work out for you, you get to leave us with the kitty and the taxpayers being boat owners, and we know nothing about that at the county? Horrible. It was the most one-sided proposal I've ever seen in my life.
Versus maybe having 3 or 4 operators competing for what they would be willing to invest. Right.
And if it's like, hey, if there's a benefit and you easily prove, hey, you got 30,000 vehicles off the street like you promised, then we're going to return that investment. Thank you very much. Right? We'll be more of like a pay for play model. Or pay for performance. You perform? Thank you. Thank you for reducing that impact on the government. They wanted a
blank check.
They just wanted a blank check.
Yeah.
And you can't sell voters and taxpayers off like that. You got to hold these people accountable. And I'm glad that I'm the one that killed it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. But your thoughts on the Now, regardless of the performance
Mm-hmm.
of the current ferry, because that probably gave you an indication of how things would look moving forward. But at the basic level, right, unraveling this whole transportation conversation, and then let's move on because I feel like we've exhausted this. I don't want to keep you on this topic all day, even though I'm having a lot of fun.
Okay.
The idea that cars are not the only solution. Okay.
Yep.
Where are your thoughts on having that kind of comprehensive? You have the ferry, you've maybe got a monorail, you've got a trolley, you've got autonomous, you've got buses. Like, where does your ideology sit within transportation? Because a lot of the things we've talked about only center around the automobile.
I want a spoken hub model. I've proposed it, but I don't think many of my colleagues get it. And I think that there's resistance, but there are proven things in Europe. It's like I think over here, some areas call it spoken hub. Over there, it's like a spider web system.
Okay.
So you have your bus route, your hardened bus route, and fixed lines on these bus routes. And then in the middle, you have, let's just call them cars. Let's call it like an Uber-like model. You want to ride the public transportation system. We have it mapped. They're pre-routed, just like a driver is routed for a bus route. You reroute just like similar to Uber does. Mm-hmm. Uber-like. I'm not advocating for Uber or anybody to be the user. And those feed the main system. And you might say, well, you're introducing more cars. But I'm saying, but how many am I getting off the road? Because now we have multiple people being picked up and taken to whatever, if it's a bus stop, and that feeds down to their work. Or maybe if it's that many more people, because we're missing so much of the user base right now, because they don't want to go 5 miles to the nearest stop. Maybe we introduce that many more people to the system, that there's that many more people that are being productive members of society, mm-hmm. and creating more revenue for us to keep promoting those systems. There are systems in those spiderweb models to where you can promote vehicle ownership. Most of the riders, the drivers, just amazing members of the community that love serving their own community. And you could literally promote models. If it truly is that's the low amount of people that we talked about earlier that we're serving, you could promote a model where this person is being incentivized to where they could be put on a plan to be introduced to true home ownership, that we have some program that they apply for. They eventually get to have the dream of owning their own vehicle while also serving their community that they likely grew up in, and really want some of the people that they grew up and saw struggling to be able to thrive. And they can feed these major systems. Those systems work in different areas. We just lack the density for the type of public transportation that you've talked about. Yeah. We didn't grow in that way. I do believe that we have the appropriate network to service a spoken hub, drastically reduce how many big empty buses we have, promote, not fire anybody, promote these drivers into this spoken hub model. It needs some innovative change, but that's how any business survives in a changing market, mm-hmm. right? And I think that it's time for us to innovate how we provide that public transportation. And I think that a spoken hub / spiderweb system, whatever you want to call it, is the most effective way. And as far as the train goes, the guy's saying $10 billion to overhaul them. That's not much less. They're going to operate at a loss and need to. The Sunshine Rail, and then I'll shoot a torpedo into transportation as we get off of it. How about that? Sure. The one in Orlando. It was this whole amazing. They call it their Golden Goose transportation. It's a train up in the Orlando area. Yep. Well, some contract and partnership is ending. I don't know if it's FDOT's numbers or whatever. And they haven't been being honest with their numbers. And they're about to get probably a 9-figure a year bill to those people. Mm-hmm. That's coming up real soon. the numbers are devastating.
Yeah.
There's no way that train survives.
And the same thing happened at a state level going back decades and decades, where the federal government wanted to build a train system here in Florida. And this has been a conservative stance for, again, decades, where they say, no, because we're going to be stuck with this bill. And by the way, if you think 7 or 8 figures is a lot at a local level, think about a state rail system, how much that would cost, right? So I think that that's always been the fear of a rail system, is the unbelievable cost.
Yeah.
The unbelievable cost. And I've joked on the show before about like the blank check theory, where when you start to take a look at our needs in terms of transportation and all of these different things we talked about, and you said, if you could write a blank check, how much would it cost? The number is unbelievable. But here's the thing. We got to do it, don't we? You mentioned Tampa's not dense, but it's becoming dense. What happens if we don't take care of this in the next few decades, and then we're sitting here with a city that's as dense as any other city in the Northeast, with buildings everywhere and zero public transportation besides maybe a couple bus lines and some Ubers and some, we have Dash too, which is an interesting concept here downtown, where it's that electric vehicle.
Yellow Teslas.
What to your point though about the spoke thing, what I like about that is it has specific pickup and drop off points, which is kind of a genius idea, because then you create those little transportation nodes, so to speak.
Yep.
And you have a predictable timing and a predictable mode of travel, and it doesn't cost any rail infrastructure. There's no bus. It's just essentially an Uber.
That's right.
So all of that to say, my fear would be we don't continue to see the trolley and see these rails as an adequate system. And then here we are a decade or 2 decades from now, and it's like, well, shit, we probably should have done that. Just like we said about the 1960s with monorail. I think that same story will play out. I don't claim to have the answers, but it just seems like if we don't rip the Band-Aid off and write that check now and figure out a real solution. And in the city, I'm not talking about countywide or regionally. I'm talking about in the city, where all this development's going. I think it's got to be done.
I just I have a friend. She's brilliant land use attorney, and I know that she had mentioned that she lived downtown, and I said, hey, how was the HART bus service? It's nowhere near me, so I'm not a rider of it actively. I've went and done it secretly just to experience it, and she leans left. I lean slightly right, and she's like, "Oh, I'd never rode HART. I'll never ride it." I was like, "But you live like you're the model customer." No, I'll never ride the bus. I just would walk 3 blocks, 4 blocks to work, even though there was the bus there. And it goes back to my original point. You can't force people to do something. You said you like to ride a car. You want the ferry. Sounds good. But you want your car. Mm-hmm. And for now, what public transit acts as is a mechanism to help those that can't have their own transportation or can't drive. And that's a reality that we live in.
I think you're right. And I think the question moving forward is, should we take this transportation effort, right, from the regional perspective, at the county level, HART, all that included, are we looking at this from a almost safety net thing, like to your point, where it's like we're servicing the underprivileged people in our community with this? Or should we flip that script and look at it as like, hey, in the future, there's going to be a ton more people wanting to use public transportation, which it seems like there's a lot more people that are moving into urban environments and downtowns than in the suburbs. It's pretty clear that the data is there, although it seems like there's also people moving everywhere, right?
But are they riding the transit? You've got an ant on your hand. Are they riding the transit? And the answer is no. The answer is we've had staggering population growth, and we got back to pre-COVID rider levels, circling all the way back to the beginning. And while that's impressive and the people at HART are resilient, they stuck through horrible leadership, which started with the previous board of them hiring that horrible CEO that treated everybody poorly. The workers worked, and they've gotten it back to that level, but the workers can't force people to ride the bus.
Mm-hmm.
The new people are clearly not riding the bus.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't make them, and I can't make them.
And you can't spend more money and make them either. You can't
That's
keep
right.
throwing money at it. Yeah. I think the point of it all, and then we'll move on.
Are you sure we're going to move on?
Yes, we will. I think the point of it all is that your ideas about letting the city
That's right.
take that burden, right, of money, tax itself, and then dictate what it needs is really the solution to all of this. And we can basically stop having the conversation.
That's right. I was not elected to be people's gods. I'm going to create, even though I will never vote for tax. I put forward the CIT that just got renewed. I put it forward. I voted no on it, but I can't put my own beliefs ahead of what the general public might feel they want or need. And so, hey, here it is. We got it. And those monies, because I made sure that we moved the words community stadium out of it, so we can't fund like the people on your baseball cap. We can't fund bad deals. We're not going to subsidize billionaires and millionaires with football stadiums and baseball stadiums with that, because I removed that word community stadium. And I'm going to make sure and work hard for the next 2 to 6 years, if I get reelected in 26, to make sure that it's going towards critical infrastructure. If it is stormwater management, which we can talk about that. But for me, it's roads and sidewalks. We're 16 years behind on, we haven't funded our general road maintenance and repaving program in at least 16 years in Hillsborough County. We've not fully funded it. We've not 50% funded it. So I'm going to make sure that I advocate for those dollars to go to there. I hope my colleagues join me in that. I just got 2 new ones and 1 reelected. Hopefully we'll keep all the pay-for-play contractors that I don't know about behind the scenes out of that decision-making. And that's how I'm going to operate. And that includes if the city would like the option to get rid of the countywide property tax, including theirs, and sales tax themselves, I'm going to give them that option.
I think that's so interesting. If I wanted to dig more, have you looked at has there been other markets around either the state or the country that have done something like that? Because that sounds very interesting to me.
No, the only time I've seen it is Pinellas County.
Are there arguments against it that you're finding or fighting against that at least are logical in your head?
The reason it was vetoed, the reasoning that was given that it was vetoed by Governor Scott, who's a very smart guy. I campaigned like crazy for him this cycle, is that his team believed that it would be a tax increase. Theirs was a 1%, and I don't know what their sales tax revenue is compared to ours. We're a much bigger county than them, right? They're barely 1 million people, I think, if they're even 1 million people. I don't know. I don't know if they hit 1 million yet. So, and you're way bigger than the city of St. Pete, right?
I think Tampa's 400,000. St. Pete, I'm not sure. What's the population of St. Petersburg, David?
It's got to be way smaller.
I think it is.
And the reason that Hillsborough County, I think, should be entitled to
263.
Thank you.
Tampa's about 400.
The reason that I would justify Hillsborough County to any of the state delegation that I hope supports it is that we're one of the most uniquely grown large counties. All of the other ones have tons of cities. We have 3.
Right.
And the unincorporated area is the biggest city. And I think that that smaller type of really granular, targeted revenue is going to be great. And I hope that it passes, only to the point to give the voters the option of doing it. And I think that that's something that should happen.
And I think that at the base level, it just makes sense in terms of like fairness and in terms of representation and in terms of getting what you're paying for. I think that aligns with those philosophies.
Yeah.
Affordable housing relating to this is, and it's so funny because all of these issues, and I do want to talk about the idea of your no tax policy, because all of these things come with tickets, right? So it's like affordable housing. You see at the federal level, at the state level, county, and the city, affordable housing funds, and we're going to be investing this voucher and this program, and like all of this money being thrown at housing, including guarantees for people getting loans for houses, increase housing costs, period. It's basic economics. I don't care what anyone says. When you give more people, underprivileged or not, the ability to get financing, it makes them easier to buy real estate. If it's easier to buy real estate, it's less competition, and therefore the prices go up, right? If there's 100 different people and 80 of them can afford a home, but then you create a policy where now all 100 of them can afford that same home, prices go up, right? There's more money flowing into the system. So with affordable housing, I believe there was a $10 million annual budget for affordable housing, which would go towards vouchers to help people out, which would maybe go towards down payment assistance. Explain that kind of story to me, because I'm unfamiliar.
Okay. So I say this publicly all the time. I do not believe in the term affordable housing.
Okay.
Affordable housing is a politically correct massaging of nothing more than developer subsidies, period. That's all you're doing. You're not making the house more affordable. You're just subsidizing the developer, okay? So if you don't believe in developing subsidizers and their bottom line, then you don't believe in affordable housing. This particular program was an ordinance that was created by my predecessor in 2019. It's Ordinance 19-19 of Hillsborough County. That's his local law. Under state law, so in the county, we have two basic major pots of funds. Countywide general revenue, where we tax everybody in the county, their property taxes. And then we have unincorporated, which is only the 1.1 million people that live in the unincorporated area, 70%. Unincorporated gets taxed lower. All the cities tax themselves higher than the unincorporated area. Under state law, it's illegal for a board to dictate or bind future money from future boards. It is illegal to do that for good reason. It's new elected officials, the voters said that they liked what they were going to do. So past elected officials don't get to do that. So my predecessor tried to do that, and then they were informed that that was illegal and you couldn't do it. So they were given a workaround, which is, well, you can't bind future commissioners. You can put language in there that binds the county administrator to present it in the budget. And then, then they can make the decision and make us go through these very emotional outbursts every year of us saying maybe, well, this bridge fell, and so we need the $10 million to fix the bridge. The most important thing, though, about those $10 million a year, all of the other stuff that you talked about, which I partially I disagree with all the federal government's involvement in the housing industry. They've done nothing but make homes more expensive and less accessible, and that's just undeniable. That's their taxes. The federal government has a printer. The chairman of the Fed talks about how they can just print all the time. They print. Those are $10 million a year of property taxes. Forcibly gotten, unavoidable, low-income families that are living paycheck to paycheck or not able to live paycheck to paycheck, that are on the cusp of even $100 more a year, making them be required for government subsidies. We're forcing their money to subsidize the bottom line in the developer, possibly creating the need for they themselves to now need to be reliant on the affordable housing fund that we took the money from them on. That's outrageously offensive to me. And that's what that money is.
Okay.
So the other money, I've said, look, I disagree with the federal government. I disagree with the state's Sadowski SHIP fund. But I've said they're there. We should have grant writers that compete for them, and you should get them to the appropriate vendors and developers that want to use them. But I will die on the hill that the low-income people, again, in Waimama, should not be subsidizing. And this isn't even homeownership programs.
Right.
These are apartments. So you're relegating these people to poverty. Many of them, you're putting affordable housing out in Fishhawk before we got in here. Talk about planning. No jobs, no public transit. We know that they can't afford transit. Why didn't you put them on the only functional transit core here in the city? So I will die on the hill that Hope Fund, which is a religious organization, which religion should not be in politics. Catholic Charities goes after. I'm Catholic. I've told Catholic Charities from the dais, I 100% disagree. You should not be forced tithing.
Yeah.
No forced tithing through taxes. And that's all that is. It's a religious group who demands that we impose a burden on low income and working class families to subsidize developers' bottom lines in the name of affordable housing. It's outrageously offensive, and that tax should be rescinded.
And I think you got what you wanted, correct? There was some sort of...
No.
Well, tell me what happened, though, because didn't you vote no to approve the funds to be allocated somewhere else?
So, what happened is we reduced it by 8 again, but we've still not repealed the ordinance.
Reduced it by 8?
Yes. So
Okay.
They reduced this year only.
This year only.
But because they didn't have the willpower to rescind the ordinance, look, future boards, when they get in there, or the current board could be like, you know what? I want to put $5 million towards that property taxes. I could say no, but pre-binding it is unethical. They reduced it by 8 or something, and then out of nowhere, part of that got used to go subsidize workforce housing, which is like, come on, we just keep calling it different things, right?
Well, attainable is another one they're
right.
saying now,
So all these different beautiful names, beautifully packaged names, to go towards subsidizing large organizations' housing for their employers. I'm sorry. I owned a business. Are you going to subsidize my employees' homes?
Yeah.
Like, how we're picking and choosing who's more important now? Like,
well, how much went towards the Tampa General Hospital deal in Brandon? Didn't the
a
county
lot.
give quite a bit towards that?
I voted no on that too.
Yeah. But it's
offensive.
And I agree with that logic, right? The logic makes sense. The naming of it, who cares? At the end of the day, it's hard for people to live. We've had so many people move to the area. There's a lot of competition. We don't have enough supply. It's really competitive. If you're a nurse making $60,000 a year, good luck.
Good luck.
And that's a lot. 60's good. You know what I mean? Teachers make less than that sometimes. And those are just secure jobs. What about the job where you're making $40,000, $50,000 a year, even less than that, and you're trying to get by? You can afford to buy a home. So regardless of the name, right? The problem is there.
Sure.
So without help, and I understand your argument with subsidies, because that makes sense to me too. The market should dictate the affordability. And I think you're right. I think the more money you dump into this, I think it might exacerbate the issue.
That's right.
And we might find that out too late.
I think it's already too late.
You think it's already too late? But look at what's happened with education. When the federal government started writing checks for everyone to go get a free loan to go to college, those universities just increased their cost.
There's that word again, free.
Free, right? But it's never free.
It's never free.
So then what is the solution? You mentioned supply earlier. Mm-hmm. Is that the way out of this?
I think so. I think that looking at different areas that need to have vertical growth is smart, and there is a market for that. Mm-hmm. I think that families want to live near each other, including, and this incorporates more housing and growth expanding out, which urban sprawl, I'm sorry, but that's another made up term. It's that people have kids, people age, senior citizens have a deficit of housing, right? Of care units, 55 and owner, assisted living facilities, right? ALFs. We need that inventory, and there's a deficit of that. And senior citizens deserve that in their sunset years. So you're damn right that I'm going to vote yes on expanding into those so that As we go, people's kids can live near themselves because I believe in the family unit. And the only way that people can have kids is to have a strong family support unit. They need grandma and grandpa there these days for sure. And they need to be able to get into a home that's semi near where they grew up, where mom and dad live, where grandma and grandpa live. And, you can, this is why I wholly disagree with your induced demand thing, which came from a social scientist in Europe in the 60s, by the way. Induced demand is like the streetcar. Well, the cars and the buses beat it. You believe that there was some effery going on. Maybe there was some of that, different types of
there always is
bad politics, right? But I can build a road, but that doesn't induce demand. What actually creates the demand? The road is the supply. The demand is you building a sky tower, a skyscraper, or a sports stadium, or a 1,200 unit home. That's the demand. So are you telling me now that people don't get to have a place to live and we're going to go back to moratoriums, and then the price of our local economy is going to fluctuate again because demand is going to continue to exceed the supply, and there's going to be that imbalance? The demand, so I fully disagree with induced demand.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of it's leaving out, like, who's saying induced demand? Are you a big mixed use developer where roads don't behoove you, but public transportation does, and you can maximize how much you're developing? And it's an incentive for you to say, look, I have a train that's coming up to my new Midtown.
Yeah.
Which Midtown's beautiful. So where that information's coming from. So for us, it's going back. It's like unqualified politicians pretending to control the free market. No, you're not. You're making it worse. You're getting in its way. We're one of the most you want to make homes cheaper? One of the most regulated counties in the entire state of Florida. We're very heavily regulated. Got to clear some regulations. I got a big developer who is like, well, I want to do this type of units. They're about $300,000. I went and visited them. They're another one. They built all up and down Manatee. Why? Well, because we said no. If we get all their impacts, we just got none of the impact fees.
Right. Or the tax revenue, et cetera.
That's right. The impact fees or the ongoing tax revenue for maintenance, right? He's like, but these types of things, these multiple inspections on different things, like, we know it works. But we're so tight gripped on a lot of these things. Developers deserve to pay all of their way in impact fees. I will never vote for the boondoggle. Was the Bass Pro Shop thing? Did you read that story years ago?
I know what you're talking about.
They gave away the farm to him, right?
Well, but even in the city, like Water Street had a ton of local government incentive to get that done too. I think it happens at every level. But also remembering too, like pre-Water Street, there really wasn't a big developer that came in and planted a flag like that and had a massive investment in our city.
I think comparing...
So the city had to kind of come up with a way to incentivize, hey man, build a project, we'll help you out, we'll do the infrastructure, XYZ, whatever that deal was. I think we've talked about it on the show, but again, there's a lot of shit to keep track of.
Yeah, it's okay.
But to your point, like, now that we are where we are, I think local government, city, county, can put up more of a wall and be like, look, we're demanding a little bit more from our developers. We're not the podunk town we used to be.
That's right.
A lot of people are moving here. We don't need to give it all away.
I gave out a statement to the Rays, and I gave an interview to WFLA. I fully welcome the Tampa Bay Rays, Hillsborough County.
Okay, I'm glad we're talking about this.
At your own expense. To enjoy all of the generosities that our communities have to offer to you, not the other way around.
Okay.
And I'm not talking about like, hey, do you need some work on like this requirement from you for the infrastructure is absurd and you need a waiver. Okay, well, is it going to impact? Is some poor person going to subsidize that later? No, great. Let's figure out a solution. Okay. I'm not talking about that.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, there is the question. Like, I remember during the mayoral race here in 2019, there was a couple politicians that had the stance of, I'm not giving one dime, right, towards these billionaire, 100 millionaire people that want to build a stadium here. And it sounds like that's kind of what you're saying, right? But also, but my question is, what about 10 cents? What about $500,000? What about $1 million? What about a nominal amount that would incentivize them to move here? And then our community can enjoy the awesome benefit of having a race stadium.
So, I'm going to blow your mind right now.
Okay.
So we all know how bad the Bucks stadium deal was, right? It's one of the infamously most horrific one-sided deals, boondoggle, against the taxpayers of any stadium in NFL history.
What makes it that way, though?
People thought, oh, well, the stadium's $175 million, right? And we can't even afford to go there. They blacked out many of the games, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They don't know the whole story. What really makes it is the contract that was signed. You said you were born in 1992?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that deal was all signed in like 1995 or 96. So you were like 3 or 4. You've been paying taxes towards it for 14 years.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to send you something real quick.
You want to pop it up on the screen? You want to airdrop it to David? Well, I'm glad we're talking about this, because isn't this, Raymond James needs a sort of overhaul, right? It's becoming 30-something years old. That's going to be a lot of money.
Remember the number,
I'll write it down. I don't even have to remember it. What number?
The total amount to build the stadium was...
you said 170 or something like that, right?
175.
175 million. TSA overview, Raymond James Stadium. This is what? An agreement between... Explain this.
Yeah, so this is my favorite document. It's public information. So it hasn't been really shared with the public for obvious reasons. But this agreement is one of the most arduous agreements I've ever read. So the Bucks have had a static $3.5 million mortgage lease for the entire time they'll be there. No escalation clauses, 3% like every other commercial lease. 3.5%, and then after $3.5 million, and then after 30 years, because it's a 30-year tax, it would go up to $7 million. Well, we had a 30-year funding source for a stadium with no guarantees beyond that. But they signed terms that give them 4 5-year extensions for 20 more years with no right of refusal on us, no renegotiation requirements, nothing. That would only make it go to a $7 million static. Now, their claim, which I'm going to ask my colleagues to fight in court if they dare ask for it, all the way up to the state Supreme Court, is that because of a few words in this old contract, they're claiming that we, the taxpayers, agreed under maintaining the stadium to the highest conforming standards of the NFL, that translated 30 years ago to $140 million of audio and video technology that didn't even exist. Food services of another $34 million. They want some more for like architecture, interior overhauls for another $200 million. They're claiming that we should have paid for, that we agreed to technology that didn't even exist 3 decades ago because of that one line.
And because of those extensions, there's no way for the county, or what's the governing board that's in charge of this? Is it Hillsborough County?
No, it's TSA, Tampa Sports Authority.
Which is, again, another one of these organizations where you have, maybe the mayor's on it, or how does it
so
exactly
there
work?
is a city council person. There is the same commissioner for 18 years, even though we have 8-year term limits under our county charter. You can figure that one out. I asked for him to be removed. They declined. And then you have some governor appointed boards, and then we appoint some people as well.
But that's the body that has the relationship with this, which is essentially a lease, correct? The TSA owns the stadium.
So the county owns the stadium. The county owns all of the major stadiums.
Amalie Arena.
They do that because they passed laws to further incentivize them that if the counties owned it under the state's laws, only the counties are allowed to have their property not assessed with property taxes. So they're fully relieved of property taxes over the past 30 years. The most interesting thing about that agreement is that they have like these operations agreements. This was supposed to be a sales tax that the taxpayers on the face said, hey, we're going to build a new stadium. In exchange, we're going to reap the benefits of us paying for your $175 million stadium. Well, the politicians rubber stamped this behind the scenes contract agreement on top of actually operating the stadium, which obligated the county and the city. The county is 2/3, the city is 1/3 obligated for this agreement to operate it to a certain level. We get like none of the concessions, like the Bucks get all this different stuff. I don't remember the exact breakout. We've basically never done it once through ticket sales ever in the history of the stadium.
Recouped what we spend as taxpayers.
In fact, there's been deficits. So what was supposed to only be a sales tax to help people and reap benefits, $25 million of property taxes from, again, the low-income people in Hillsborough County have gone to subsidize the billionaire owners and millionaires of the Bucks. Another $25 million of property tax relief because we own it. So we're out $50 million for an obligation we could never meet. And I think maybe they finally met it once with some of their recent concerts.
And so now, right, the stadium is nearing 30 years old.
Yep.
Which means renovations, overhauls.
$500 million is their allegedly current ask, which I'm going to be a big fat no on.
You're going to be a big fat no on.
I'm going to say, yeah, I'd like to challenge the validity of this contract.
And what are you looking for? You're looking for the team, the NFL, the concert, the industry to make up for the taxpayers.
Yeah, I mean, we subsidized them to our own demise. And their response is, well, great news. I've got you locked in for 20 more years. Your funding source was not even agreed to then. But you did get 15 more just now. $600 million of the newly approved CIT is for infrastructure. Well, we can't build new stadiums.
Yeah.
But we have to maintain our own buildings. So they are approved on the line item maintenance items of the CIT. And this is allegedly going to be their ask.
Well, I think initially when all this stuff was created, it was because there was competition between markets. And I think the fear was if we didn't build it here, Orlando's going to do it. They're going to give them the money, and we're not going to have a sports team.
It's gross. I'm not voting yes on that.
But here's the thing. I get why they put extensions. It's very typical. You want to show, the concert goers, the NFL, that, hey, you have a place here. We're not going to kick you out at the end of the lease. You're going to have options to extend. I understand why that language is in there.
Except for we only had a 30-year funding source. And the idea was that this operating agreement, that it would be so amazing with all of the ticket sales that we could afford to fund that. But it didn't work, and your plan failed, and now the taxpayers are out even more money.
CIT passed, though. That's the funding source. Correct?
CIT was the original funding source. They are not in there for $500 million.
Let me connect the dots here. I have all these conversations with these different people, and whether it's Greg from Thea or I had on Pinellas Transit Authority and the mayor and like all these different people. And as I'm learning about how deep these fingers and spider webs go into every organization, it almost seems like they're along the way in our really country's history, there's been a misrepresentation of what the government was designed to do. And you might appreciate this because I was a huge Ron Paul fan way back in the day. I was a libertarian when I was younger. I really appreciated the idea of a very limited form of government. Mm-hmm. When this country was first founded, the free market was supposed to dictate so many things. And there really is a shift in American culture now that recognizes some of these issues of having too much government. I mean, that's the reason why I believe Trump won. That's the reason why Doge is coming up, right, with Elon and all this stuff. So there is a recognition of, whoa, wait, maybe we had too many boards and programs and incentives and all this sort of stuff. Maybe we do need to dial it back. Here's my problem with dialing it back. And I think it is a good idea, by the way, to dial certain things back,
sure,
of course. But here's the issue. Has the train left the station? Are we too far down the road? Can you really expect developers, sports teams, the trolley, all of these different things we've enjoyed for so long? Can you really turn the faucet off? You know, if you turn the faucet off, do we lose the bucks? Are we really ready to lose the bucks? Are we really ready to turn the faucet off on affordable housing funds and rely on the free market entirely, maybe without increasing supply? Like, at the end of the day, the checks need to get written. Who pays it is the question. You mentioned, like, there's no such thing as free. That's a beautiful thing to say because it's true. There really is no such thing as free, because it's either the taxpayers or the private sector, right? That's going to foot whatever bill is in front of you. But I just think we're so far down the road to turn the faucet off. How do we get back to limited local government? Number one, and number two, can the local government even pay for some of this stuff? Don't we need the federal help? Don't we need the state help?
Oh, well, like, I thought you meant this stuff,
well,
but a lot of the other stuff.
I'm talking in general,
broadly.
Right? The general idea of being extremely careful about where we spend money. There's nothing wrong with that. But what I'm saying is, if it relates to the stadium or affordable housing, like issues that the private sector maybe can't pay for because it's been subsidized for so long, how do you get away from this? How do you fix something like that?
Well, first I would say there's always hope. You can always turn it off. It's just that it's to the measure of what willpower you have to do it and stick with it. You know, the nanny state has reached its expiration.
Yes.
The taxpayers have spoken clearly on that. And the more offensive thing would be to not make the hard decisions and say, you know what? These are kind of the areas where there's studies that were done in the early 2000s by the state of Florida, by the state Senate, that demonstrated that them building a team here did not necessarily mean travel growth. It just meant siphoning from other great activities, boating, fishing, whatever else is in the area. You know, all of these things they guess. I call it a cheap parlor trick economic impact statement. That's a cheap parlor trick. I have a poll going right now on my X account of how much money should working class people subsidize billionaires and millionaires in the name of these cheap parlor tricks. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, just like when I'm at a business, I say, hey, taxpayers, here was my economic impact to you. Here was the receipts. Audit them. They're like, well, we guess that the average person spent this and that if they were outside of 50 miles, which is only Bradenton, right, then they definitely stayed in a hotel. No, if I live in Bradenton, I'm driving my family back home. I'm not buying a hotel room. It's expensive. And then they also probably went out to eat at a restaurant for this amount. And here's our estimated impact to the taxpayer. Mm-hmm. That's you would never invest in a business if they presented that model to you, and neither should the taxpayers. That's my short answer on this.
Yeah, and I think to put any sort of blanket qualification on any statistic when you're looking for a number, you know, oh, if it's 50 plus miles, we ticket that as a hotel, right? I think that's probably the wrong way to do it. But I also think there's these intrinsic things that happen economically that maybe you can't account for. A good example is like I had on Santiago Carrata with Visit Tampa Bay, right?
Nice guy.
So when he's looking at all these different economic impacts, when large organizations want to pick a city for the Super Bowl, for some big trade expo, they have little boxes they want to check. And one of those boxes might be, does the city have an NFL team? And so maybe it's not that the taxpayers would make a return on its investment in terms of ticket sales, concert sales, whatever, to pay for that stadium. Maybe it's the shiny object the taxpayers have paid for that has helped us host a Super Bowl, host, I don't know, Taylor Swift, or whatever these large things are that come to our area that provide economic impacts outside of things that directly relate to the stadium.
Let me put it to you this way, though. Since we're talking about like the nanny state, Santiago, I wish I had 10% of his energy, the friendliest guy on the planet. You said you hadn't watched any of my nonprofit stuff. So, you know, the Sports Authority, all these places. Now they created this Tampa Sports Commission. And then there's also another Tampa Sports thing. What are you guys doing? And it's all a different way for them to get different pots of money in different ways. So when I first brought my nonprofit report, it was, oh man, because you were talking about, hey, how do we turn the spigot off? It was, Commissioner Wostal is so mean, doesn't care about nonprofits. They're nonprofits. And I'm like, well, actually, nonprofits are very profitable. And it turned out nobody else knew that talked to me. But nonprofits are very profitable, and I'll explain why. We recently got our annual market report from the CEO of the Tampa EDC. Do you know what that is? Mm-hmm. So that was created, and it's like this external public-private partnership. We pay a lot of several $100,000 a year of property taxes into it. Then they get city of Tampa pays money into it of their property taxes. And we hadn't audited or even required simple IRS 990s to manage at-arm length transactions. What's the executive pay of these companies? Mm-hmm. What's taxpayer benefit? And since no one wants to audit it when they bring us reports, I decided to start asking them and presenting the IRS 990 to the people. Their CEO, I presented, this was just our very last board meeting. Their CEO makes $512,000 a year, plus some benefits.
Whoa.
Santiago, whom I love to death, and if he was in a street fight, I'm diving in with him. The last we checked, several years ago, made over $500,000. He's probably over $700,000 if I had to guess now. The CEO, I brought up Tampa Family Health Center, supposed to help the most disadvantaged members of our society. I want to help them. Mm-hmm. Heavily federally subsidized, most of their money. They're also heavily subsidized by that secret indigent healthcare tax that no one knows about, I found out, in Hillsborough County. That CEO makes almost $900,000 a year of a nonprofit medical organization that's there to help low-income families, twice as much money as the President of the United States. I brought in a nonprofit where I said, hey, I don't like this nonprofit because the CEO is an elected official, and it was my predecessor who just started to arbitrarily start flagging through that flagging process money to that elected official. It seems really bad. We shouldn't do that. And it was consistently from one of my colleagues, Commissioner Wostal, you're wrong. They don't make any money. No one makes any money from that. And I said, well, you know what? I'm tired of you not offering the truth. So I went and got that elected officials Form 6, which you have to file to the state, which clearly demonstrates, even though they're IRS 990, they claimed on there they make $0 directly or indirectly. But then on their Form 6 to the state, they do correctly show that they get paid $150,000 a year from a heavily taxpayer subsidized local nonprofit. These are all things that are operating in the darkness outside of the government because it's these private institutions that are heavily subsidized. And these are like the very high paid bureaucrats that aren't bureaucrats. And they're all making $500,000 a year. So of course they're mad at me because I don't believe that poor people should help subsidize salaries like that.
It's a lot of money.
So
It's a lot of money, but don't we also need to pay a healthy amount to recruit? I don't want to pick on Santiago, but he's just like this cheerleader for our region and probably is the best guy to do what he does, right?
that's not about him, but yeah.
No, I know it's not about him, and I shouldn't have even brought him up, but to attract top talent, don't you gotta write a nice check to get those people? Otherwise, they'll find a private position and work for a different city or work against us or whatever that may be, right? We have to pay them something.
If it was going to be that they go for a private company to pay that much, then why isn't it a private industry that's not heavily taxpayer subsidized?
Taking care of.
Since there's so much money for the private sector to benefit from that, why aren't they the ones paying it? Because they're going to benefit from it.
Well, and why aren't they the ones that are taking it over entirely? Does it have to be a government subsidized organization?
By state law.
Mm.
What is it? It's Visit Florida. That's the parent.
Florida is the parent, right?
And it's nothing against them, but it's like these salaries are just you talk about the spigot.
Yeah.
I can close that spigot. It's going to be very uncomfortable for a lot of people. But you got to close it.
Well, I think all of your ideas and everything you've talked about today is very timely with what's happening on a federal level.
Yeah.
And I think at its base, it will be very interesting to see how it plays out federally and locally. And I think you're absolutely correct on wastefulness, number one, really, and also number one, transparency.
Transparency.
The public needs to understand what money is going where.
That's right.
I think that's very important. Also, what you've brought up about these different boards, I talk to a lot of different people. I don't dive into them like you have on each of these subjects. I mean, you're on the county commission, right? I'm just a member of the public. I just have a freaking podcast, right?
This is a great podcast.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
But it is alarming, right? Red flags go up when I hear that there's like 6 different organizations that are all these different boards with all these different people. And then you look at the connections with some of the money stuff you've talked about today.
Absolutely.
I think at its core, transparency, accountability, budget friendliness, let's not throw money out the window, is super important.
Super important.
I also know that we're a growing region with needs, and balancing that out is, I think, your job, right? That's why you're there. You're there to have those hard conversations. You're in that position to say these things to the public so that they have a voice.
That's right.
And without you being the bad guy, I know you get a lot of flack.
I do.
Who's going to say it?
That's right.
Who's going to say it? And maybe they don't say it for 2 reasons. Maybe they don't say it because A, they're on the take, or B, they've been a part of the system for so long that's, working, and they know how to navigate it.
You immediately get told, well, re-electability. And, I'm never going to make a decision that's about, will it make me more attractive? Like,
yes.
Am I quiet and will I just get passed through? I'm not going to do that. It's a flagrant waste of my time and our entire communities for anyone to do that once they get elected. It's offensive.
Yeah.
Go up there. Hey, this is what I found. I think it's a huge problem. Do you want to do anything about it? No, but I'm going to keep saying it and keep putting it out there until hopefully, even if I'm not the one that gets it done, maybe the people that follow after me are the ones that get it done.
I think that is much needed in local politics. Backbone's an important thing, and you've got it. And to be able to vote no on something when you know the rest of the board is going to hate you for it, and there's going to be members of these different boards that are angry at you, but you do it anyway because you believe it's the path of not just today, but decades in the future. It's an important thing.
Your kids. I don't know if you had kids.
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's important. It's important because there's a lot of politicians that I think a lot of Americans are frustrated at that have only made decisions behind closed doors for every reason we've talked about today. Whether they've got a relationship with this other board or this other nonprofit, and then these people donate to their campaign, and I don't want to say that because my constituents will be mad at me and then I won't get elected, but I know it's the right thing to do, but I'm going to hold back from saying it. You don't seem to have that.
Yep.
You seem to have a thought process, an ideology, a philosophy about all these things, and you drive forward with them.
What's right is right.
Nothing's going to sway you. You're not going to have some angry person in a crowd yell at you. It's not going to sway your decision.
It's not. Because I know at my core, I care about them, and I'm trying to make things that I believe will be good to move us forward. That's why I don't let it. Not because, hey, you can be mad. It's just that, hey, everyone's frustrated. I get it. I'm trying to bring an idea. You disagree with it. I hope that my idea wins because I think it's good. And that's it.
That's the reason why we have a democracy.
That's right.
It's the reason why.
It's what I thought I went to war for.
Right. Well, I think the national election has opened up those conversations more, which I think is a good thing. I think there's more dialogue about local politics than there ever was before. I think more people are paying attention to some of the bullshit that you've seen and we've talked about today, and I think that's a good thing. We're in the process of a transition in this country, whatever it looks like on the other side, I don't know. But the good news is there's a conversation about it. And that's awesome. Man, David, what are we on? Hour 2 and 2.5? Okay, we got to get you out of here. I feel bad.
That's okay.
There's a couple other things I did want to touch on. We've talked about a lot today, and thank you for being here. The storm, though, I did want to quickly touch on the storm. The storm brought out weaknesses in our community that
I need to extend my parking.
Oh shoot! Your street parking
for Jane Castor gives me a ticket. Hang on.
No.
Personally, hold on 1 second.
Where'd you park on one of the side streets out here?
I'm not going to tell her until I extend it. Hang on.
Yeah, well, get the extension done. And then. No. So when these storms came through, I think on the other side of those storms, it exposed weaknesses, right? And one of the weaknesses was some of the storm water flow, and that relates to development, right? What properties have been built where, and the historic nature of these events. It's not like the county or the city necessarily planned for this to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, when there's a 1 in 300 year flood, how do you prepare for that?
You don't.
But we are where we are, right?
Yeah.
And I heard that there's a sort of investigation going on. And it's a partnership between, the city and a couple different counties looking at, hey, what happened? What went right? What went wrong? What do we need to do to help mitigate some of this stuff? Talk about a big bill.
Yeah.
Right? This is going to be very expensive to fix some infrastructure.
Very expensive. Where I would start on that is reminding everybody that Helene flooded the mountains. Right? It flooded us, and then it also flooded a mountain. And I think that that's a very important variable in reality. When you're under times of great duress, everybody wants a finger to point, right? So I just want to caution that there might not be a finger to point here. This might just be that we got hit by 3 major back-to-back water events that were all different and saturated us up, on top, and then more importantly, the final one saturated the upland bodies of water.
Right.
And we're lowlands to everything. That's why there's a bay. And I don't know that there's any amount of stormwater engineering that could have prevented the Hillsborough River from peaking over 3.5 feet more than we've ever recorded. That's a huge number. I was boots on the ground in this place called Cinnamon Cove, which is up near University Area Mall. Low income, had 6 feet of water, way up there in the non-flood zone. Their vehicles were floating. It had brought so much fish up. There were dead fish rotting that had filled the grates, right? And I just don't know, way up there, what you could have done. The state of Florida has some of the best building codes in the entire nation because of Hurricane Andrew in 1992. I don't know how many of the homes that were flooded were built after 1992, but I'm going to be asking for these variables. It's very easy to lie with numbers. And I want to make sure that we're not doing something that's dishonest when we get back these. I want to see the whole picture. And if many of these are that they were built on these lowland, on creeks, beds, post or pre-1992, I want to see, was it 98 to 2%? Was it 50-50 to maybe suggest that the Andrew things? I want to see all of those before I would jump to any conclusions. I worked more than any other commissioner on my body out in there, getting into people's homes and the people that were hardest hit. I care deeply, but I'm not willing to jump and point a finger, blame game. Did someone not put on a pump? I'm not giving a head for a noose. I just refuse to play that game because it doesn't help. It doesn't help anybody. It'll make some politicians look and feel good if they do that, but I'm not trying to serve anybody's head up on a platter. Whether or not we say, hey, we should have had some more pumps. This pump shouldn't have been moved. We need a change, but you can't engineer that much water. You just can't do it. Keystone flooded, Swift Mud opened the gates, but the down body of water where it was supposed to drain out to was already flooded. Had nowhere to go.
Right.
So it went up. You can't engineer out that much water. You just can't do it. Mm-hmm. We're at Tampa Bay Water. I also sit on Tampa Bay Water. We're looking at a second whole new reservoir. That could be huge, and that could help manage a large pool of. But look, we have very, very strict stormwater engineering requirements. Like I said earlier, we're very heavily regulated. We have very strict ones. You talked to Josh Bellotti at staff. You interviewed him. That guy knows his stuff. That was a great interview, and whether or not he is on the study, he's on the team. That guy that you met, Josh. And look, they'll find something. They might say, hey, we can make some improvements. These are reasonable. But for us to elevate everything out of that amount of water, what do you got, $1 trillion?
Right. Yeah. What are we really talking about here? I think we're talking about an amount of money that almost doesn't make sense at all.
I just reminded everybody, Florida forever was completely underwater 25,000 to 12,000 years ago. And then at one point it recessed out. There was almost no Gulf of Mexico. And then it came back, and then there was a thin layer of water over all of Florida for thousands of years, is why we have so much lime all over our state. And, are these people that, like, I'm not going to get into fear porn and panic mongering. Are you saying that I should emergency evacuate everybody that lives in Florida up to North Carolina because there's a storm that came in and flooded up to the mountains, and potentially because of the past, all of Florida was underwater and we could be there again? So sorry, everything in Florida stops. I don't know, where does it end? Where does this study end, and how far back in history are you willing to go of water levels and plains and glacial periods?
It does open up a really weird, broad conversation. Yeah. And I think your point about, like, there might not be there might not be an answer in there that people are looking for. Yeah. The answer might be, hey, this was kind of a freak event. And, it's a possibility. And I think the question of, is there more we can do? For sure, right? You just mentioned, like, there's different pumps, there's different what was, like, the big basin that would essentially
a new reservoir, Tampa Bay Water
reservoir, right? Like, there's things we can do, but the idea that we could stop something like that from happening, another historic flood event, it's like probably maybe if it was just Milton, maybe we were just fine. Let's just pray to God that was a freak accident and it doesn't continue to happen more frequently. Yeah. Right. I think prayer is something that we could do, and
prayer is always needed.
Hopefully, yeah, right. Always needed on all these issues, you know? Well, listen, man, we've sat here long enough.
This was great.
Yeah, this was great.
Yeah, and I appreciate it.
I think we do have some disagreements, but at the core, we're aligned in so many ways.
Yeah. And look, I hope that your streetcar makes it. I just don't know the exit for it.
Okay.
All
right. Well, we will, I guess, have to do this again.
I'd love to.
We'll do it again, and when we can update on a lot of the stuff, because it's very dynamic.
I'd love to.
Hey, Josh, thanks again, man.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Have a good day.
All righty. Bye, everybody. Hey, guys, if you want to watch episodes just like this one, make sure to click right here to view the rest of our full episodes, and also make sure to subscribe by clicking right here. Thank you for watching.